just from a district standpoint. They have distributed, she and her department have distributed well over 200 devices to kids, to teachers, to staff members, support staff members who don't normally have devices, but to be able to contact with kids and work with kids, as well as run all of the technology infrastructure for all of the departments. I'm so just really, really thrilled and just so thankful for her and her department. I want to thank the board and the cabinet for your leadership and your guidance. It has not been the 3 weeks that any of us could have expected nor been prepared for. And so every one of you has been individual conversations and group conversations, and I just am so appreciative of all of that. We need to thank Mrs. Geritano when we get a chance. She won't be on the meeting tonight. We expect that now that it has extended, more and more meals every day are being given out. They're going to distribute over 2,000 meals this week to our families. So they're meeting Monday and Thursday and giving about half of those out each time, as well as the administrators who are helping with that in her department who are making all of those meals. It just is a real need in this community, and just so thankful for them getting that done. The building principals, they're the first line for most questions. So if you get a chance to put some love out to your building principals, you'll want to do that. Often the families and the teachers call them first because they know them best. And so for them to be able to do that. For our social workers, our counselors, and our nurses, if you know any of them, they really are reaching out and making sure we're aware of needs, meeting needs, driving to families' houses, delivering devices, delivering equipment, delivering meals, making sure that people who need medicine have medicine, just checking in with those students who we know, need a little extra check-in, being able to do that on a daily basis. Obviously, our teachers, I put in an email that I sent out to them Friday that they're doing an almost impossible task unbelievably well. Far more positive emails than critical emails from families just saying how wonderful teachers are being, reaching out with kids, providing the work. I think we found a good balance in terms of how much work, as well as the type of work that can be done. So I think everyone's finding it, as well as our families. Obviously, our parents and our students, they are staying unbelievably positive, been very willing to learn all the new rhythms, both our home rhythms. How do you be a full-time parent with your kids behind you, but then also have to teach them, and then also have to work, or whatever their home routines look like, as well as the new school routines. And just the grace that they've shown to us when everything hasn't been perfect, as we've been able to figure the thing out over the weeks. So I'm just really, really thankful for that. And just wanted to say that this was our first opportunity from a public standpoint to be able to share that. Just a couple protocols for the meeting. Again, it still does not look like we have any community members on it. All employees and board members on there. We are recording this meeting as normal. So if your dog jumps up in the background, it's okay. It'll just be kept forever that we'll be able to see that as they come in to visit you, Mrs. Walters, in the laundry room or whatever happens. Mrs. Miller will be keeping all members on mute, as we did with our meetings previously. If there is something that you would like to say, if you would simply just unmute your computer, and that way I'll know that you'd like to talk, and then we'll just have the conversation that way from that standpoint. If for any reason you're having technical difficulties, please just text my cell phone, and then we can try to make that fixed. If for some reason it's getting frozen or you can't hear or something like that, just text me. I have my phone here next to me, and I'll communicate with Mrs. Miller to try to get all of that fixed. If for some reason we have major tech issues that cause the meeting to stop, or for some reason we are required to stop the meeting, Mrs. Miller will pull the plug on that if that's necessary. And then if everyone would just simply log back in 2 minutes. So that if for some reason we do have to pull the plug on the meeting or we get technical difficulties, just use the exact same links, exact same call-ins that you did, and we'll just reconvene in 2 minutes to start from there. Okay? I'm going to pause for a second. If there is anyone who is an employee but still would like to make public comment, now would be the time to unmute yourself, because now would be a time for public comment before we move into the meeting. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment?
Dr. Bolton, I would.
Please.
So I'd like to thank you and the administration, the teachers, the building principals, everybody who has played a role in keeping the community tied together. I couldn't be more proud of the district and the employees and the way everybody's handled us. So I appreciate it. I want everybody to know that from me. As president of the board, individual members are welcome to chime in. But on behalf of the board, I want to thank you all.
It's very kind, Mr. Krause. Thank you. All right, we're going to move into the meeting then. Our first item has to do with a new position, which is a wonderful combination of some of the areas that we've been working over on the last couple of years. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Miller if you would give Dr. Scheid the capability to take over the screen, and Dr. Scheid will hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. I think I'm able to do that. I'm very excited to be able to talk to you about this position. It has taken us some time to get here, and it's exciting that we've arrived. So let me bring this up. And start at the beginning. So as Dr. Bolton just, can you see it? Is this enough? Okay, good. All right. So what we're going to talk about is a coordinator position. It's a new position, and it will combine 3 different areas. And I'll talk about each of those through this presentation. And then we'll talk about issues, we'll talk about solutions, and we'll talk about recommendations. So we have had an increased demand for cyber learning, and that has happened over the last, I'd say, 4 years. When we started with our cyber program, and I think that was 4 years ago, we really didn't have that many students, but we looked at the issue of using private providers and spending that money and sending our students out to people who we really didn't know. And it's not like they were doing a bad job, but we started to see more students requiring cyber, and those were the students who we really felt should be in school. So we put a lot of thought into that, and we talked about having a blended model. So over the past few years, we've really spent a lot of time creating our own blended cyber courses, using outside sources for cyber courses, just so that we can keep our students in school. The last thing we wanted were students who were dealing with social and emotional needs to not be connected to school. So that's really been the main focus of cyber learning over the last 4 years. And that demand is increasing. So that's number 1. And number 2 is we need more blended capable courses. While we're working on that, I know we started out with being able to offer 2 of our own, and that means teachers in Penridge using Penridge curriculum. We have offered 2, and by next year, we're going to be able to offer 10. So we're really excited about that. And we're also excited about number 3 bullet point is the need to develop the college and career pathways and our extended dual enrollment opportunities for our students. And we did start a committee. There's a lot of work that has to be done. I know I've shared with some board members and committee members about the work that we're doing, and it really does require leadership, and it requires a lot of attention. So that's another issue that we have. It's not a bad issue. None of them are bad issues, but they are concerns. I mean, we need to make sure that we're able to provide the guidance and oversight for that. And then the last need that we are coming to is a need for the development and coordination of resources for our gifted and talented students at the high school. And as we go through the PowerPoint, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, because the second presentation of the night kind of connects with this one. This one's really about coordination of services. And then when I do the next presentation on the actual additional need for what teachers are doing at the high school for gifted, you'll see the connection, hopefully. So again, as Penridge Cyber Program continues to grow, the time requirements that are needed for this attention to it has far surpassed what one person can do. And I'm sure you're all familiar with Kara Garish. And Kara is one of our technology integrators. And in the beginning, Kara was doing technology integration. And she was the person, and still is, who spearheads Canvas. Not only just Canvas for the high school, Canvas for the middle school. And I will say it's a blessing, so thanks to the school board who allowed us and approved that and encouraged us to use that learning management system because we could see the value of it right now. Anyway, so Kara's been doing that, and we've been building our cyber program. And now we really need to focus on expanding or creating college and career pathways and increased opportunities for our students outside of school. And then in addition to that, with the gifted programming, we need coordination for the GIP case managers that I'm going to talk about, and for providing enrichment resources to students who may not even be identified gifted, but really would benefit from some of those services. So I want to talk about some of the job responsibilities of just the cyber program. It takes a lot of time, and Kara is doing a brilliant job. She really is. She coordinates with the blended learning teachers at Penridge. And like I said, next year will be our 3rd year and has grown from 2 to 10. And this takes a lot of time working with the teachers on how you design courses to be blended. And when I say blended, just to make sure everybody knows what I mean, for example, in an English class, I could have 28 students sitting in front of me, but I have spaces for 2 or 3 students a Penridge student who may require my class. So I have taken the time to work through to have both live teaching in front of me and for my blended students. So that's what we've been doing. And the more we do that, the better connected students stay and the burden of increased cost goes down. So that's really what I'm talking about when I say the blended learning course design. And then providing cyber support for the students who are in our CAP room. We have a cyber access CAP room for our students right across from the library. I'm sure many of you have seen that. Students are in there all the time. That requires oversight and support, just answering questions and helping students. And we do have a teaching assistant in there this year who's been helping. It's just not enough. Kara also works with the online instructors, our outside providers that we use, Edgenuity and such. She works with them directly because prior to all of this, we didn't have connection with them in order to really make sure that our students were receiving what they could and should. And Kara also works closely with the Pupil Services Department because we have many students, special education students who require cyber learning. So she works with that department as well. And these are just some of the things that I just highlighted a few. And in terms of the value of the cyber learning program, this chart really highlights our increased savings. And what that is a combination of, by providing the services ourselves and being able to work with students in the district, and by having a separate Penridge program, we have been able to keep students here. The retained students from 16-17 till this year went from 13 to 43. So the message is out there. And I think we've done a pretty good job now of making sure that everyone in the district knows the services that we can provide. So if families start saying, well, we're looking for a cyber option, they don't look anywhere else. They look to us. So there has been value. I do want to say that that's very important. But the number one value that we have been able to do for our students at Penridge through this cyber program is maintaining relationships with the students. Being able to say, hey, even if you come in for just 2 classes, we don't want you to lose a high school experience. We want you to be a part of it. And I do want to say that that's the number one value, but clearly the savings is also a value to the district. And we only expect the savings to increase by increasing the number of cyber blended courses that we create ourselves. So we're getting there. So now we're working on college and career pathways at our high school and really trying to think about experiences that we can provide for our students. And while it's been exciting and a lot of people are on board, it's going to require a lot of time. Some of the things that the responsibilities of this part of this coordinator position would be to kind of summarize and compile and prepare data, right, for our grants. We really want to increase the number of grants that we write to support us. There'll be research in the labor market to get information on what the community needs, what we should be doing for our students to make them the most productive when they leave and meet the needs of the local community, the state community, and obviously the global community. And we have had a panel of our community workers, our workforce, and they have come in and they've been terrific, sharing information on what they think we should be doing to help them. And we're going to continue to do that. This person would also serve as the liaison between the colleges too and the district. We'd like to expand more dual enrollment opportunities at Bucks County Community College and beyond. And then the actual creation of these college career pathways. So whether or not we go with 4 pathways, 6 pathways, whichever we're going to do, that's going to require a good deal of work. Like I said, we have started that, but we intend on expanding it. And then the last piece of this coordinator position would be oversight and support to the GIEP case managers. I'm going to talk, this is kind of putting the cart before the horse on this one. I am going to be talking more about that at the next presentation. But not only oversight for the GIEP case managers at the high school, also serve as an enrichment resource to students and teachers in the departments. So while the teachers who would be serving in the role of GIEP manager would be doing that work, this person would be coordinating that and supporting those teachers. So the solution that we thought of would be to combine the responsibilities for those 3 imperatives that we just described. That would create the coordinator position, but it is also important that we maintain the integrity of technology integration K-12. We have 6 through 12 one-to-one, and we have laptops and iPads at the elementary schools, and our teachers really depend on the technology integrators. They're coaching them, that we cannot lose one. So in other words, we would replace a technology integrator coach. They would continue supporting the teachers. So that, and we would have the new, the coordinator position as well. So when you look at that, we would recommend adding the new position to the budget. And then the point 2, replace technology integrator coach. That was, okay, I'll talk about that. So if we move the current technology integrator position to one of the, well, Kara Gersh is presently in that position. So if we move Kara's position to the, or one of the technology integrators position to the coordinator position, there would be no increase in the budget there. So that would just be a wash. But we would replace the current technology integrator, and that is about $65,000, $70,000 there. So that's the increase in the budget. And and there's time for questions. Does anybody have any questions? If there are no,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Dr. Bowman. I was going to say, if there are no questions, I can move into the gifted, and then you'll kind of see how one supports the other.
I just had one question. When you talk about the person coordinating between gifted and cyber, is that person also going to coordinate for the students who have IEPs and want to do cyber, or just GIEPs?
That person will continue supporting both for cyber, special ed, for students with IEPs and GIEPs. That wouldn't change. That is what she currently does. So there's no difference in that regard. The cyber piece of this doesn't change. She still would be doing what she currently does. The only part that she really wouldn't be doing, we're kind of moving this towards all the work with Canvas, and the daily work with teachers for technology integration would be moved to actually the coach, the integrator. this person would have the full cyber, right? Oversight of, and you know what, Mrs. Bettis Clemens, it might make more sense to you when I present the .2 GIEP case manager position. That might make more sense for you. But the answer to your question is, the person still would have oversight of all students requiring cyber. It doesn't matter, it's all students.
And I think to differentiate the piece in terms of gifted, the gifted and talented is separate from the cyber. The gifted oversight not only is for the cyber students, but it would be for the students who are the high school proper, as well as students who are showing signs of talent in a department. They're going to work directly with the support positions that Dr. Scheid's going to talk about next. And that's separate from the cyber piece. This person would have the gifted and talented responsibility within the high school proper, as well as in the cyber.
Okay, thank you. And that was kind of, that's where I was going with that. But so we already have we have one person who's assigned to gifted right now at the high school. So then this would be 2 people assigned to gifted, or did I miss something?
There are no assigned gifted teachers at the high school. No teacher, there are gifted teachers, gifted STEM teachers at the elementary school, and there are assigned gifted teachers at the middle school. There are no assigned gifted teachers at the high school.
Right, but who's right now coordinating gifted?
One of the Keith Faverka does a lot of coordination at the moment.
So this would move from Keith to a new person.
The coordination of it. Keith's actual job description doesn't include that, but he has been helping pupil services with it. Gifted's under pupil services, and Keith has been helping them. It's really not under his job description either. But I do have the job description for this position, if that would help.
And it is similar to what we've talked about in terms of the elementary and the middle school level, in terms of finding direct classroom supports. Where Mr. Faverka isn't able to provide that, he does supervision to make sure the GIEPs are getting done on time and from a paperwork standpoint. And so this person would take that piece of that now that Mr. Faverka has moved to K-12 in terms of his responsibilities, but it is more about the classroom piece. So Dr. Scheid, why don't you move into the classroom piece to talk about the classroom teachers that this person would help coordinate with?
Sure. Oh, what happened? Can you see that? There. Can we see that now? Can you, Dr. Bolton?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, everybody can see. So now we'll talk about gifted education at the high school. So currently with gifted education at the high school, students take part in Socratic seminars, really to be working with their peers, collaborative intellectual dialogue, so to speak. They do have the opportunity to take advanced placement courses and honors courses. They have specific field trips, and I know they had several this year as well. And they really can take advantage of dual enrollment. And that's currently the services. And Dr. Boyarka, or Dr. Durr, I'm sorry, I'll get used to that. She can jump in anytime she wants, but this is currently what high school students are receiving in terms of gifted ed at the high school. So the issues are, we don't have gifted support teachers assigned at the high school, and it's challenging to meet the needs of students and meet the legal requirements of Chapter 16. And it's limited to gifted students. So the services don't serve students who would benefit from experiences to stretch their capacity to think creatively and expansively. So it's limited in that regard. So we've been thinking about how can we expand that type of resource, those resources to students who aren't identified gifted but would benefit from that. So this is what we were talking about here. We're talking about 0.2 release time for gifted enrichment teachers. So what that would look like is we would assign one teacher from each core subject area, math, English, science, and social studies, that they would have one teaching section to act as a gifted individualized education plan, GIEP case manager. And the duties of that position, the 0.2 of their 1.0, they would write the GIEPs, they would hold the GIEP meetings, they would act as the contact for students and parents on their caseload. They would provide at least 6 enrichment opportunities over the course of the year for the gifted students, but they would also serve as an enrichment resource to students and staff in each of those departments. So how that relates to the coordinator position, the coordinator would be coordinating this 0.2, these teachers who would be providing those enrichment services. The oversight of the gifted services would also be part of the coordinator's job. So what we would hope that the case manager, one of the jobs would be to recognize learning differences, right? Taking a look at developmental milestones, cognitive, affective characteristics of students who are with gifted abilities, kind of identifying related academic and social and emotional needs. So really, it takes time to think about that, know the students, try to provide supports to meet their individual needs. So that would be one thing. And then design appropriate learning and performance modifications for the students with gifted abilities to help enhance their creativity, help with curriculum compacting, helping with pre-testing to see what students already know, so their time isn't spent on things they already know. They can go deeper in the subjects and such as that. So the 0.2, right, so the one period that teachers would have per day, they would spend time developing this, modeling this, helping teachers in their departments. So this dedicated release time to develop and support teachers with differentiated instruction and assessment practices for all students. So as I said, with curriculum compacting, mini lessons, studies, independent studies, conferences, and such. And then we would also be meeting the legal requirements of Chapter 16 in Pennsylvania. Not all states have gifted ed, but PA does. While Chapter 14 discusses special education, Chapter 16 is gifted education. And there is no increase in staffing for this position. When we went through all staffing in those 4 core areas, we were able to have a 0.2 in each one of the 4 areas without adding any staffing. Whoop, I don't have question 1 on that one.
Mhm.
So that's the combination. That's hopefully that makes a little bit more sense in terms of when we talk about oversight from the coordinator's position to the 0.2 gifted positions.
Did you say how many students we currently have that have gifted IEPs at the high school level?
I did not. Dr. Durr, do you have that number?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit over 200. Yeah, it's a little bit over 200.
Because when we looked at caseload, it was in that 55 to 60 per grade level. Because these the science person would basically have the kids who are gifted in science, but it doesn't fall that evenly in terms of 1/4, 1/4. And that was about the number they'd have. So it's in the low 200s total.
Right.
How does that compare to the number of students we have with IEPs at the high school level? And who do we currently have doing that for each subject area for kids who have IEPs. So do we have someone that is for social studies helping to provide those modifications of curriculum for all of our students who have IEPs at the high school level?
So that's done by the case managers, the teachers themselves, as well as at the high school level, Mr. Ware. Dr. Durr, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, it's typically the case managers and our supervisor, Scott Ware. And then they also have the support of the curriculum supervisors that they can reach out to as well.
How many case managers do we have at the high school?
Is the question about special ed or gifted ed?
And-
Okay, special ed, okay.
Yeah, I don't have that right in front of me, but I can get it before we end tonight.
I think that that's a really great idea and a great model to have someone who has a particular subject area background to really be able to help provide those modifications for the teachers. But it just made me think, that would also be a really neat thing to be able to do for kids on the other end of that spectrum. So, that's why I asked. And if coordinators aren't specific to content area, that could be something that would be beneficial in that area as well.
We
There
have
are 12
16 case managers at the high school.
12 of them are in learning support. Dr. Scheid, do you want to show us the job description that goes with this position and just highlight the areas that you talked about in the presentation? You just want to practice sharing your screen again, don't you?
I'm like, oh, please let this work. There, it worked. So this is the draft job description. So you'll see the qualifications, bachelor's degree, minimum of 3 years or more teaching experience. That person reports to me. And then the principal function, the blended learning coordinator will lead development and implementation of programs to improve learning opportunities for all students, including virtual courses, dual enrollment opportunities, gifted enrichment, and career pathways. The role of the coordinator is separate and apart from the evaluative role of the principal or supervisor. The coordinator facilitates and supports the work of the teacher. The coordinator provides teachers with consultative feedback in conjunction with their professional judgment and supervisory or evaluative responsibilities of the principal. This is not a supervisory role. It's very similar to, it's like the other coordinator positions that we have in the district. And then you'll go through and, we're looking for interpersonal skills. That is typically equal to technical skill, being able to work well with people, teachers wanting you in their classrooms and such like that. The ability to design individual or in collaboration with others, high quality professional development, communicate clearly and concisely, knowledge of curricular content, best practices related to online instruction, current state laws and district policies related to online learning, educational resources available, computers and related instructional technology devices, software programs utilized in the school system. Obviously, the ability to troubleshoot minor problems with the computer, but that would be low on that list. Knowledge of the laws, policies, and procedures with respect to student safety, security, and confidentiality, and ethical practices with online learning. Ability to establish and maintain effective working relationships. And there's students and families, maintain a visible presence for the students, communicate with the students. These are some of the things I talked about earlier on. Promote high student achievement, advocate on behalf of students, assist with the design and implementation to improve online learning, and that definitely includes blended learning, in particular with us at Penn Ridge. Providing support for cyber students and their families, and there's a lot of time spent talking with families who really maybe at the onset of their thinking think they need to go to an outside cyber school, and you really have to take some time and build relationships with families and help them see what we can offer here, and serve as a liaison between the school, the virtual instructors, students, and family. Work with the building administrators. Guidance counselors have a lot to do with online learning, with cyber learning. A lot of times students go to their guidance counselors first, and the guidance counselors get in touch with us, and so this person will continue to coordinate. I think I talked about some of these other things. Working with pupil services. Again, our cyber program serves all students. Prepare and submit student performance reports, assist in gathering data for student performance, and so on. And then maintenance and growth of the program, communicate with vendors about student performance, plan and attend functions to promote district learning options. I mean, I won't read through all of these, but there's a lot of job responsibilities under this position. I think most of this, the bottom, I want to read this. I don't want to read them all to you. You can see them. But under maintenance and growth program, work with district instructional technology team to coordinate the use of the district's learning management system to support internal blended learning and cyber courses. So this is a person who has to have full understanding of what is going on and what works so that we can continue to work together on the initiative. For college and career pathways, I talked about some of these already in the PowerPoint, some of the things that this person will have to do. And I think that would be the end of that. So I highlighted all the areas that we've already talked about. And this is currently what we expect from that position.
Any clarifying questions? I hope that you see the connection to some of the areas we talked about during the board retreat as they address cyber and blended. We currently have about 2% of our high school population involved in cyber and blended courses. We expect that to more than double over the next 3 years. And so to be able to have a person to be able to leverage that opportunity. And Dr. Scheid mentioned this, she's also a money saver from a standpoint of whenever a student and parent starts talking about going someplace else, Kara Gersh is the first one who calls them after the building level people to kind of say, hey, what can we do here? How can we design something to help you stay a Penn Ridge student? Which is better for the student, but it's also financially better for the district to be able to do that. Obviously, dual enrollment is something we've talked about and continued to try to enhance, as well as the pathways. The pathways is an area that is part of our long-term plan that 3 years from now, to have something set in place and to have a person who can help organize that, as well as work with the business community to be able to come into the schools and have our students go out of the schools and into the business, as well as that PD and classroom support for gifted and talented, to work on teachers in terms of what does enrichment look like, what does differentiation look like for all of our students, whether they have GIEPs or they just show an interest in something. I think it'll be a real benefit to our teachers and to our students. So positions do not show up on the board report. We present new positions to you so you're aware of them, as well as they obviously impact the budget, which is the board's responsibility in terms of approving a final budget so that you understand the budgetary impacts. The gifted position doesn't have a budgetary impact, as you learned. The other position would have that from that standpoint. So the job description will show up on the April board meeting for approval. Because that is a new position for us, but the position itself will not show up. Any other questions before we move on to pupil services? Dr. Scheid, thank you, nice job. Mrs. Miller, if you could flip the capabilities over to Dr. Durr, who's sitting in her HGTV home. Oh, Mrs. Cullen, did you have something?
Just want to say that I think it's great that we're starting to look at ways of individualizing instruction for all of the students and meeting them where they are and figuring out how we can serve them best, because they are our customers, and it is good that we're able to keep them in the school district. And we have had a long time where the gifted seems to have been parents weren't as satisfied, and even students expressed that the gifted, they didn't really feel was meaningful to them, the program. So I'm glad to see that we're maybe turning our attention a little bit to that, to address those needs, and also seeing how we can meet the unique needs of students, because that will keep people here with us.
Thank you. Dr. Durr, you want to work on your budget first? Is that where we're going first?
That's first, if that works for you.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So just jumping right into this, every year I try to give a little bit of data. So this slide shows some historical data, students attending charter schools, and then students attending alternative education placements. So the first item speaks right to what Dr. Scheid was talking about, with really keeping kids, bringing them back from charter to Penridge Cyber. You can see how the numbers have gone down since we started Penridge Cyber back in 1617. And then students attending alternative education placements, those numbers have gone down this year because of an effort to keep our students, if we have a policy violation, we're trying to work with them more restoratively and keeping them and getting them the support they need, as opposed to looking at alternative education placements. So you can see the data on that slide. And then the next slide is just some continuing data, students attending out-of-district placements. These would be our special education students. That number has remained pretty consistent. It's hard because some of those students are students that may have some pretty specific needs. Like we might have a student that has emotional support needs and needs a partial hospitalization program. We might have a student that, for instance, families want them to be, if they have blind or visual impairment or deaf and hard of hearing, the family might want them in a specialized program so that they're immersed in that culture. So that's some of the times that we have out-of-district placements. And then we have the numbers of students that are attending BCIU placements. That number has also remained pretty stable. We're trying to make some changes with that by doing some more programming that I'll get to in a little bit later in the presentations. This talks about our budget pressures, which probably everybody is aware of in special education. So we do have increasing costs from the IU and from other placements. We have students that have significant needs. They may need nursing services or personal care assistance. They have adaptive equipment needs or significant counseling needs. So those are some of the student needs that we have pressures. And then the legal pressures. When we have settlements, we're trying to bring students back off of settlements and trying to keep settlements from occurring in the first place. And then also monitoring our, our usage of the legal guidance and trying to watch our costs there as well. This is the budget history starting back in 1718. So you can see every year with this budget, there's been an increase, mostly because of the special education costs. So you can see from the 1819 to 1920 year, we had an increase of, it was a $327,840. It was a 3.06% increase. So this year, even though we have an increase, we're trying to really monitor that. So our percentage increase is a little bit lower this year at 2.89%. And I just have to give a shout out to the, the team that really works, the special education supervisors and everybody that supports special education to try to keep this budget as low of an increase as we can. Okay, these are the budgets that fall under special education and pupil services. So we have 6 budgets that I'm going to take you through this evening. The first one is our regular education budget, and this is the history that you can see from 17-18 to the current. This is where we're seeing our biggest savings in all of our budgets this year, because we're doing a really great job of the cyber charter and making sure that we bring kids back into our Penridge cyber program. So again, that just speaks to all the work that's been done with everybody that's supporting Penridge cyber to bring kids back and keep kids. This is the next budget. This is our biggest budget, special education, $1,200. And this is just a list of everything that's covered under this budget, everything and more, so that you can see the extent of services that are provided. This slide shows the increase over the years of our special education budget. And again, this is where we have the largest increase. Most of this increase is due to increased costs from the BCIU. I just wanted to note that their costs for us, just for Penridge, are up 4.7% over last year's costs. So it's really hard to maintain, no budget increase when the IU costs are going up that much. This budget series includes IU services. It includes our Lakeside counselors, our contracted services from PTS, which is our OT and PT services, and some behavior support. This budget here also includes special education charter school tuition, and some of our placements and claims and judgments. So that's everything that's encompassed here.
Dr. Dirk, could you clarify for me? You said that the IU costs are going up significantly, but I thought they were keeping the per student cost the same. So wouldn't it only go up if we were sending more students?
No, is this Mrs. Banis Clemens?
Yes. Sorry, this computer won't let me have a visual, so I still have to work that piece out.
All right, we're all learning. No, what I did is they give us a worksheet where we have to put in the numbers of students for each service that we need. So we looked at last year's worksheet, and I took those exact same numbers and put them into this year's worksheet, and that's how we can see that the budget went up 4.7%.
And I believe, Mrs. Banis Clemens, what you're talking about is the program and services budget, which is calculated per student, but not the direct services budget that Dr. Durr is speaking of.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, then we get to some of our smaller budgets. This one is it's just homebound travel. So when we have students that are receiving homebound services, the travel for the teacher to go out and serve those students. So there's no variance there. That has remained the same. The next budget is the pupil services, $2,100. And this is another smaller budget. It encompasses our counselors, psychologists, social workers, student accounting. And this budget has actually gone down a little bit. What's covered under this are really supplies, materials, and travel. So we were able to get a little bit of savings there. And then this is our legal fees. Again, this is when we reach out to our attorney, Sweet Stevens, Katz and Williams. We work with Tom Warner. And anytime that we reach out to him and he does some consultation with us, or we have a case that he's doing a review of. That's where these costs come from. So we've really been trying to monitor that use, and we're able to get a nice savings under this budget series. And then this is health services, 2,400. There's a slight increase here because we need to replace some of our AED machines, which are older. So we have a little bit of an increase there to cover that. And then this is sort of the final at a glance, so that you can see in each of the function areas, the history over the years. And then this year, 2020 to 2021, what we're proposing, you can see the changes and the variance. And then that's how we come down to an overall increase of the $319,184.
And Dr. Durr, you said the IU budget was up 4.7%. Do you know how many dollars that is? Because my memory is it's more than the 319 that you're up overall.
I don't have that. I don't have that right now, but I can get it. Anybody have any questions?
I do. This probably goes to Mr. Dahlberg, but I'm kind of curious what the overall cost of the 41 students that are outplacement. What was that aggregate cost for the 41 students? And the same with the 50 that are out at the DCIU or the ICU. And that's really up to Mr. Dahlberg, and that's not something I need right away, but it's just a curiosity factor what that aggregate cost was.
We'll pull those for you and send them to the whole board.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mrs. Cullen.
So it's not really a budget question, so I don't know. Is this the end of, because I can wait to ask it if, it just has to do with the returning of students to the regular ed classroom when we bring back the alternate placements. Dr. Durr, we had talked about in years past preparing the teachers, and I was wondering if you might just be able to explain to all the new board members and me, give me an update on how those students are transitioned back into the classroom in a way that teachers are prepared, to accommodate them.
I'm still unmuted. Right. So when we have students that we're looking to bring back, the special education supervisor is highly involved with that case. So they're working with the family, writing the IEP with the case manager who will be accepting that student. So for instance, if it's a high school student, one of the high school case managers is assigned. Scott Ware works with that case manager and the family. They develop the IEP, and then they work with the assistant principal for scheduling to make sure that the student is scheduled into appropriate classes where they can be included. And then once we know those things, then the special education case manager reaches out to the regular education teachers and they review the IEP, they review the specially designed instruction, and then that's how we support all of the teachers to be able to program for that student. Does that answer your question, Mrs. Cullen?
Yes, thank you. So they're prepared. It would never be the case that a student would come into a classroom before a teacher had been prepared.
That should never happen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know that Dr. Durr gave her thanks. I want to also add my thanks to her and her department. I know that Castle and Mrs. Summers are here, and Mr. Ware as well, that all of them, I mean, some of these money-saving pieces they're talking about, in this context, we talked about them as saving money. But really, as I've gotten to work with this department and their decision-making and care for families and for kids, in terms of making sure that we're doing what is best for kids and really meeting their needs has brought down those outside placements and the need for legal fees, because families feel like they have an advocate and have voices that are listening to them, and not doing everything they say if it's not the appropriate thing to do, but having those conversations and being willing to have that. So I just want to add my thanks to them for that. It's been really neat to watch over my year plus. Thank you, Dr. Durr, and your department.
Thank you, Dr. Bolton.
Right, I believe we're moving then into conversation around new positions within pupil services.
Give me 1 second. Okay, can everybody see that? Yes, okay. All right, so we have some new classroom positions that we wanted to present to you this evening. So I'm going to start with, we have 4 classrooms based on need that we're looking to add in special education. And I'm going to start with the first classroom. This is an elementary autistic support classroom. And on the slide, you can see the justification for this classroom. We have 7 new students that are coming in from early intervention. We have 1 student that we're looking to bring back from an IU classroom. We have 8 total new students and not enough students that are moving from 5th grade up to the middle school. So because of this increase, we're looking to add 1 teacher and 2 teaching assistants to support this classroom. So by adding this classroom, then we would have a total of 5 elementary autistic support classrooms. This allows us to narrow the grade range that each teacher is responsible for, and it allows better collaboration between special education and the general education teachers. We're trying to do more of that so that we can make sure that students are included as much as possible in the general education setting. The 1 student that we will bring back from IU placement would be a savings of about $50,000.
Dr. Durr, before you move on, can you clarify a couple pieces in terms of elementary AS? 1, would you talk about compliance and the case management loads? Because autistic support has different numbers than many of the other classifications, as well as talk a little bit about our service model. Some of the new board members may not know in terms of our regional approach to some of our autistic support services. Please.
Right. So in autistic support, we can have a total of 8 students on a teacher's caseload. That number changes a little bit depending on how much inclusion time they have. But for the most part, it's 8 students on a caseload. And what happens is we look at every student individually. We try to make sure that they are included in general education as much of the time as possible. And then the teacher and the teaching assistants are able to go into those general education classroom settings to support students and to work with teachers so that the teachers know what the specially designed instruction is and what supports the student needs. There are times that the students are out of general education, for instance, and it happens more at elementary level. You know, if they need some direct instruction for reading because they're not able to participate in the reading instruction in the general education classroom, then they come out for part of that. But we try to include them as much time as possible.
The 7 new students who are coming in from early intervention, are they currently in specific autistic support placements, or are they currently included in their early intervention program?
I don't have that data.
Because I would think then we haven't, I mean, at this time of the year, I don't know how much, and maybe Jen Summers can speak to this, but I don't know how much we know about those 7 individual students. So I don't know why, if we have 7 kids who aren't in a specific autistic support setting now and are included in their preschool program, how we would assume that automatically they're going to need to be in an autistic support class instead of in their home school in an inclusive setting.
Well, and we're not saying that they have to be in an autistic support class. So depending on what their current placement is, Mrs. Summers looks at every student, but they still need a teacher. They still need to be assigned to a teacher's caseload. So we still need an additional teacher because of the number of students that are coming into kindergarten. So
But
they
if-
could be included, if we might have a student coming from early intervention that's included 85% of the time, and they're only out for direct instruction in reading. That doesn't mean they're technically in an autistic support classroom. They're being included, but they're assigned to this teacher's caseload and these teaching assistants so that they're able to go into the general ed classroom and support that student.
So just
But-
to clarify, the teachers that are currently have autistic support students, their caseloads are already full. So legally, we need to have another person that can legally manage their paperwork in order for, that's the whole purpose of the teacher. I just want to clarify that I'm understanding what you're saying.
That's correct.
Okay.
But you're assigning this specific autistic support, you're assigning 5 specific autistic support teachers to specific buildings, which means you're making the assumption that all 7 of those students who go to whatever elementary school of the 7 elementary schools is going to be rerouted to a different elementary school that's not their home elementary school to be assigned to an autistic support classroom, where we would have 5 autistic support classrooms within specific buildings in the district. If those students, in other words, were to be fully included or partially included in their home school, they couldn't be assigned to that teacher because that teacher would be in a different building. They would then be assigned to the special ed teacher of whatever elementary school they're attending, correct? Like, you're not going to have one of these autistic support teachers floating from building to building. If a student is included in their home school, they wouldn't be assigned to this person. They would be assigned to the special education teachers of their building.
I'm not following the question.
So
If I have a child who's autistic, who's going into kindergarten, and my home school is West Rock Hill. West Rock Hill is not one of the schools you're proposing to put one of these 5 autistic support classrooms with these 5 teachers. And so if I choose, or it's decided in my IEP meeting that my child is going to still attend West Rock Hill, you would not be assigning my child to one of these autistic support teachers. You would be assigning my child to the special education teacher that's at West Rock Hill, which is also, who would also be certified to teach kids with any disability, they would still be certified to teach someone with autistic support, but it wouldn't fall into what you're saying, where this person would be assigned to someone in that other building, because you would have to physically move the student to that teacher's building for that teacher to have the student assigned.
that is
My kid
correct.
would have to go to a different school.
That is correct in that scenario. I think the 2 points that are being made is, number one, there are more students coming from EI than before. And so EI numbers continue to increase. When we look at our AS patterns, our current kindergarten, current first grade, and current second grade all have 8 students in them. We don't expect that population to get less. We actually believe that population will get more, which is why we're slating 8 slots in the kindergarten. Some of these 7 students may very well be part of those 8 students who are moving in, as well as the one who we can move back from an outside placement. And so when we look at the numbers from an AS specific standpoint, there is the compliance issue there. Dr. Durr talked a little bit about the grade level strands. And actually, I wanted to talk a little more about why that's so important, not just in AS, because that's going to show up in other places as well. But from a compliance standpoint, from an AS, yes, we do expect that there will be at least 8 kindergarten students for next year. But the EI piece on this slide is really to talk about the fact that we have more students than ever coming in pre-identified at younger ages. It used to be that kindergarten and first grade were light. From a pupil services standpoint, that is no longer the case. Some of this is also the tribute to Mrs. Summers and the program that she's been able to put together at the elementary program. This is partly that if you build it, they will come. And so we do now have a reputation from a standpoint of a strong pupil services department at the elementary level. And so we do have a lot of families who now are keeping their students in the system and not looking to do something else, especially around kindergarten, in terms of full day kindergarten versus the services that we provide here.
I guess the fact that we're assuming that these 7 kids would go directly to one of these schools fits the narrative and the statistics that I'm seeing and that concern me in the district, where having the kids go to a separate school if they're diagnosed with autism is the norm instead of the exception. For our population, statistically, for us to need 5 full autistic support classrooms rather than these kids that's telling me we can't meet, there's that many kids whose needs cannot be met in their home schools in an inclusive or partially inclusive setting in their home schools. And I think that we're going backwards if we're looking at automatically the assumption is they're excluded and going to a separate building into a separate classroom. And the exception seems to be the inclusive setting instead of the exception being pulling them out into a separate class. And I sent all of you a video. I don't know if all of you have had the opportunity to watch it. I would encourage you to watch it. It's a really great example. There were actually 2 videos that dealt specifically with autistic support, and it really showed the significant benefits to a child who has autism, who is put in an inclusive setting, and how much more successful not only that child is, but also the rest of the class is. And they were really powerful. They're very short, but it really showed the significant benefits all around from that model. And to Mrs. Cullen's point earlier, doing that though, we need to be able to provide the supports in the classroom so that our teachers are able to meet the needs of those students. Just sticking a kid in a classroom doesn't count as inclusion unless that student's needs are being met in that classroom. And so I'm all about increasing the services and that we're providing and the supports that we're providing in the classrooms. I just think that this isn't the direction, this isn't the way to be doing it. I think we should be doing it in a more inclusive way, and those kids should be going in their own buildings.
Just out of curiosity, I'm sorry. I'm just curious. Is it something that parents often complain about that have their child that is enrolled in the autistic support program or any special education program within our district? Do we frequently have parents that request accommodations to be made to maybe if their child, rather than being at Seiler where our autistic support program is, they want to keep their child at Guth? I mean, is it something that parents push for and we try to accommodate, or is maybe everybody's okay with the fact that we're still accommodating them within our school district, and eventually they all move up to high school together and come back together, and it's just a management standpoint as far as teachers and the general ed teachers at Seiler maybe are really accommodating with the inclusion because year after year they have these students in their classroom and they are comfortable with it, and they work closely with the autistic support teachers in their building. Like, is this a model that we are including them as much as possible and doing it within our district? But I just didn't know if that was how much we bend to accommodate if a parent's really fighting to keep them in their specific home elementary building. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Mrs. Summers really works very closely with families. We had a couple of families this past year. I think we had 2 families that wanted to stay in their home buildings, and she was able to work with them and put some supports in place to do that. But we do have a very strong program at Siler. And I think I just wanted to respectfully respond to a couple of points that Mrs. Vanis Clemens made. We do include students, and we include them appropriately and with a lot of support. We do not ever just put a student in a regular education classroom without making sure that they are supported and that the teacher is supported. We have a number of students, that we have over the years put in their home buildings. We try it. Sometimes it is successful, sometimes it's not successful. But we are including students as much as possible. And, if they aren't included a high percentage of the time to start, that increases. And we see that increase as they move through the grades. And by the time they get to middle school and then high school, they're almost fully included. So our data shows that we give them a little extra support in elementary, and then they're able to increase their inclusion time as they move up through the grades. And I just wanted to talk about the videos too, because they are very powerful, and I think we're all in complete agreement. We want kids to be included in general education, and we work so very hard to do that every single day. I could go into any one of our buildings and make a video that would show exactly the same things that are happening in the videos that were shared with us. I am so proud of our staff and everything that they are doing. We have a student at the high school that has multiple disabilities. She is significantly, has some physical limitations. We completely renovated a bathroom for her. She's fully included at the high school. She's on our unified sports team. It's just such a great example of what we're doing for kids.
But with all due respect, I don't think that the video, if we're doing what the video is showing, that video does not indicate taking all the kids that have, most of the kids that have autistic support, putting them into a specific building assigned to a specific class, rather than them being included in their home schools, primarily in, or entirely. I mean, you look at these weren't kids that had mild autism. These were kids that had significant significant disability that was being accommodated in an inclusive setting. And it doesn't see, I mean, you just said we had 2 parents request for their kid to stay in their home school. Why does a parent, so basically that again reinforces to me, we're going to put your kid there unless you request otherwise. And that's not the way it should be. The parents shouldn't have to request for their kids to be in their home school. That should be the go-to model, and sending kids to a different school should be an exception to the rule. And statistically, for us to say that we have 5 full classrooms worth of kids who we can't do that for, then in my opinion, we're doing those kids a disservice. And I just also want to clarify, because I think I gave the wrong impression. I wasn't suggesting that we're sticking kids in classrooms and not providing those supports. So I didn't mean, that wasn't what I was trying to suggest. What I was suggesting is, if we're switching more to the model of putting these kids that aren't currently in that that are currently in a different building back into their classrooms, that we would obviously need to provide supports to be able to do that. And that would there's a cost to that, and then there's increased supports that we would have to be giving. So the point that I was trying to make is I'm fully willing to give more supports. I just think they need to be going in that direction instead. That was the point. I wasn't trying to suggest that we're dumping kids in classrooms and not providing those supports. So it's more, if we switch to that, obviously there's supports then that we need to be providing in that other direction. And just for anyone, and I don't know if we have anyone in the public on this video in this meeting or not, but I guess it would be in the minutes too. I just want to, for anyone who's wondering what videos we're talking about, it's www.thinkinclusive.us, and you click on there, it'll give you 5 videos for inclusive education. And the ones that were, all 5 of them are very powerful, but the ones that were very specific to autism were the 3rd and the 5th, and gave specific examples of that kind of a scenario. So just so that other people have an idea what we're talking about.
Mrs. Cullen, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think for me, the bottom line is providing the right balance for all students, right? You need to make sure that you're delivering the appropriate education to all 7,000 students that we have enrolled in Penn Ridge. And so if the way that works best is to have, as Dr. Durr was describing, that you have in elementary school, and correct me if I didn't hear it right, but what I thought I heard was that, you know, in elementary school, we have them more separated, but then as they go toward the high school, they're pretty much fully included. Is that what I heard? Did I get that correct, Dr. Durr?
Yeah, some students are fully included from the beginning. You know, it just depends on their level of need. But typically in elementary school, when it comes to, you know, reading and math skills, they may need to have some direct instruction in those areas that require a small group or one-to-one instruction. So that's why we see a little bit less, you know, more pull-out time in elementary than we do as they go up through the grades.
Okay. And so, I just lost my train of thought a little bit, but you know, when you have the students and you're working them into that situation where they can be fully included and you're being respectful of everyone's needs, I think if you know, to the point of having kids going to their non-home school and not presenting it to the parents as a choice, at a certain point, you know, there is something to be said for the professional opinion. Parents are looking to the professionals who have some experience with this. And maybe when you're placing them, you could say, look, we think that the best place for him is, you know, Grass. And, you know, this is what we can offer at Grass. I think it should be presented to the parents what the district believes and what you professionals that have been working in this and studying it, what you think is the best placement. Because as a parent, I would want to know that right off the bat. I would want to know, Dr. Durr, what do you think from your experience in our district and knowing our personnel and all those sorts of things and what we can provide, where do you think the best fit is? And then I can weigh those options maybe, and maybe, you know, I'll end up requesting, now I think given everything, I still want him in his home school with his neighborhood buddies. Okay, that's fine, but then you're making a decision about the programming that you want, and that is the parent's decision, no doubt. But I would not recommend that you alter the way that you've been presenting it to people. Always present to them what you think your best fit is for the student, always leaving room for the parent to make the ultimate decision, because I do believe strongly that it's a parent's right to make that decision for, you know, a family's right to make the decision for the student. But I would never want you to hold back on your professional opinion. That's all.
Right.
Dr. Thompson, you wanted to make a comment? Dr. Thompson? Mrs. Miller, are you able to unmute 4198? Try it now, Dr. Thompson.
Oh, great. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I was actually, what I was going to say, Joan basically said for me, so thank you. I wanted to point out, as a parent of a a child with on the spectrum. That, well, we have to keep in mind that these are individualized programs. And while I love the idea of inclusion, it is not always the best scenario for every student. So I do think, you know, I like the idea of putting all of the kids in the same, you know, in a classroom, but I also like the idea of keeping them in their home school, but that doesn't always work. And it has to be how we're doing it that's what the IEP is for. So I just like to reiterate and keep that on everybody's mind that the IEP, which is the decision made between the professionals and the parents of the school, in the school, you know, what is best for that student. And while keeping a student in their home school might seem like a really great idea for inclusivity, children with autism spectrum disorders don't always benefit from inclusion. They benefit more from one-on-one. That's my understanding. So, you know, just as a parent and having done research for my children and in my past, I just wanted to just remind everybody that this is an IEP thing. And so I think we do need to be giving more support, whether or not we transition someday to doing, you know, we have enough students where we could have support in each school, that might be great. But I just wanted to clarify, you know, that it's IEP, and I'm sure everybody knows that, but just to remind you that, you know, each child is different and what their needs are going to be different. Where my son really did not benefit from being included, and he's high level, high functioning Asperger's. So on the spectrum, definitely, but was not good in an inclusive setting. So I had to homeschool him, not once, but twice. So, you know, it just doesn't work for all kids. So let's just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we're saying a similar thing, but kind of in an opposite direction. I think that it is an IEP, and and it should be based on each individual kid's needs, but that doesn't seem to be what's happening. The fact that if you look at it statistically, you look at best practices and you look at the studies, they show that primarily kids benefit from being included, being in their home schools, and a co-teaching setting is the best setting. And so for us to say that, well, but here in Penn Ridge, you know, almost all of our autistic support kids benefit from the exact opposite of what all the studies and best practices are showing, just doesn't make sense. And so, you know, when it's individualized, we should be looking at each individual kid. And what I've been hearing and what I'm seeing is, you know, just like the 7 kids coming in from early intervention, the assumption is this is our go-to model. And I just think we have it reversed. The go-to model should be the inclusive model, and the exception should be those kids who, when you look at their individual needs, need that other setting. That shouldn't be the first setting. And when you look at those kids are more successful the other way. And so I think we're doing them a disservice if we're pushing them in that direction. And when you say the parents absolutely have a major input in this, but in many cases, we're the ones who are recommending to the parents that this is where they send their kids. What I'm saying is we shouldn't be recommending this option to the kids as frequently as we are. And the state obviously agrees with that, because when you look at the numbers, that we're not in compliance right now with the state, because we have more kids that are not as included as the state expects them to be. And and look, I've heard, okay, well, there's so many districts who aren't in compliance with the state. You know what? There's so many districts who are who can't afford to not raise taxes every year. There's so many things that other districts aren't able to do. Does that mean we shouldn't? There's a lot of districts who didn't have a great cyber program build up and are struggling in this period of time, and everyone has different circumstances. But for us to say, well, other districts aren't doing it, so we shouldn't lead the way. We're leading the way in a lot of areas, so this shouldn't be an exception.
I just want to clarify 2 things as we're talking about this. The difference between homeschooling and inclusion, because they are not the same thing. Inclusion has to do with how much of the time you're spending within regular education. That is also called least restricted environment, which is LRE, which are the numbers that Mrs. Baines-Clemens are quoting. And all 13 of the school districts in Bucks County are below the recommended LRE. And last year it was 460 out of the 500 in the state of Pennsylvania that were below the recommended LRE. Although they are goals and they are numbers that we're working to and are improving. From an inclusion standpoint, we have a wonderful record in terms of the percentage of times our students are in the regular ed classroom. By the time we get to 4th grade, the normal model for AS students is check-in only. That once you get beyond content, which is primarily K through 3, when you're talking about math and RELA, once you get beyond that, when you get into 4th grade, the vast majority of our students are in for check-in only, or perhaps check-in and social skills. Those are the 2 normal models once you get beyond 4th grade. So from an inclusion standpoint, our students are in with their regular ed peers on a regular basis. The homeschool model, when you're providing instruction specific to students with certain disabilities, the model we do use is the model where we have those students regionalized in both AS as well as ES, which is the next area we're going to talk about in terms of a regional program. But I just wanted to make sure we were clarifying between homeschool and inclusion, because the research on inclusion is very clear, and that is the goal, and that is something that all of our special ed supervisors use as a default. That is the first thing we try.
Right.
There is not research on homeschooling. I'm sorry, on being in your home school and whether there's actually a benefit there or not that I could find in terms of whether that's there. Although that is our default, we want kids to be with their peers from their community, but from an academic standpoint, I have not been able to find that research that shows that. Mrs. Cohen, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to say that there's good things and bad things about having 499 or 495 school districts in Pennsylvania. And that is that just because other school districts are doing something a certain way, that doesn't mean that Penn Ridge has to do something a certain way. We hire professionals to evaluate situations. And if it changes, like Sherry was saying, if we end up having a situation where we would have enough students to populate the classrooms in the home schools and we want to change that, I'm always open to changing it. But to suggest that, somehow we're setting our students at a disadvantage, I'm not sure that our specific stats reflect that. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe nationally, I don't know where these studies are, what they're including in their studies. But maybe it's not the same situation as us. And if our students are thriving in what we've provided, and clearly if we are attracting families to come to Penn Ridge, there's a reason for that. Maybe us doing something in a different way is better, more attractive to families. Clearly it is, because they're coming here for those services. So I would think if people were fleeing from us, then we could say, hey, maybe we ought to do it like the other guys. But if you have a model that's working and attracting people and families are receptive to it, then, I think that that's something you stick with. But again, if a family says you suggest this and we want that, well, okay, we could give that a try. But I would always go with both options, and I would definitely tell the family which option the school district thinks would be best, all things considered. And again, you have 7,000 students in the school district, and we do have to keep that in mind. We always have to keep that in mind. So, I'm good with the suggestion you've made.
Dr. Durr, I'm going to suggest we move on to emotional support. Oh, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I just wanted to add a couple of things. I should have probably made clear also that we have students with autism in pretty much all of our elementary school buildings. These are the students that need more significant supports that come to the regional programs. So when they don't need as much of a significant support, they are in their homeschool buildings. And that goes across any disability category in the district. The other thing that I wanted to mention is I pulled some data that we looked at. I think it was the end of last year. And when you look at the state numbers for students who are included 80% or more of the time, The state is 62%. Penridge is 58.4%. Now, when you look at the data for students who are included from 40 to 80% of the time, so you're combining two categories, the state is at 88, or the state, Penridge is at 88.6%, and the state is at 85.8%. So we're actually doing better than the state average. When you look at the top two categories for inclusion, we're above the state numbers. So that's good news for Penridge. And we're hoping that this year, when we look at our numbers, that it continues in that positive trajectory. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next classroom is an elementary emotional support classroom. So we have, again, 6 new students that are coming in that look like they have a significant need for an elementary emotional support classroom. With those new students, we will have a total of 32 students that have the more significant needs. Currently, we have 2 classrooms, but with the incoming students, again, we don't have enough students moving up to middle school. So because of the caseload numbers, we're going to need to add 1 additional teacher. And in this case, 1 additional teaching assistant, because we can utilize the teaching assistants across, now it would be the 3 classrooms to support the students. So in this scenario, the caseload, teacher caseload would be 12 students max for emotional support. And I think I covered, let me just see what else I have here. By adding this classroom also, again, we'll be spreading the students more by grade. So we will have a K1 classroom, a 1-2 classroom, and a 3-4-5 classroom. So what this allows us to do, it allows the special education teacher, again, to be able to get more into the classroom and support the general education teacher and support the needs of the students in the general education environment. So are there any questions about this classroom?
I want to park on that last piece, that what Dr. Durr said, because I should have said it under the AS program too, because we do want our inclusion numbers to increase, right? That is the goal. One of the ways to do that is to better prepare the regular ed teachers to be able to handle students with disabilities in their classroom. Our current model, primarily with AS and ES, and you'll see this when we get to the high school program and even the middle school ES program, is our staff currently has too many grade levels that they're responsible for, which means they're balancing multiple grade level schedules. And so the time they're able to spend in the regular ed classroom modeling for the students and for the teachers is just not where we need it to be. So to be able to get grade spans in AS of primarily 1 grade level, in ES of primarily 2 grade levels, is going to impact our regular ed teachers in those buildings where they have them. And to a positive thing for the teachers to have more bags of tricks that they can then help these students, and the students don't have to leave the classroom to go back to whatever they're studying.
I can speak to that as a long-term substitute in emotional support at Grass in 2009, 2010. I had grades 1 through 5 on my caseload, and it was impossible. And it was a disservice to the program and to be able to work with the teachers and meet all the kids' needs. So I think that, you know, to me, this is really appealing for the special education teacher to best, you know, service the students, and then also training for the staff in the building to make sure every student's getting their needs. So.
Okay.
Apparently slide 3 was the charm, Dr. Durr.
All right. So I'll move on to our 3rd classroom need, which is middle school emotional support. So we have 3 students that are moving up from elementary into 6th grade. We will have a total of 17 students. Currently, we only have, is there something drawing on there? Seeing something on my slide. Did you see that? I don't know how that got there.
I saw
Anyway,
that, Sherry.
I'm sorry?
I was just letting you know I saw it too.
Yeah, I don't know how that got there. Okay.
One of our kids must have hacked into your computer and started doodling on it.
That's what it looks like. So this is our current classroom at Central Middle School, and these are some of our toughest kiddos. I don't know if it's the puberty when they get to middle school, and then they have the emotional support needs as well, but these are some of our really tough students. So what we feel would be best is to follow the same model that we have at the high school. And what that entails is we have a second classroom, and then when students are having, difficulty in general ed, they need to come out to have the support in their emotional support classroom. We still have a teacher that can be going out to general ed to support all of those other students. Right now, we don't have that. So our one emotional support teacher, it always has a student or two or three, having a meltdown at any point in the day coming to her classroom. So we don't have the ability to go in and, just as Dr. Bolton was talking about, support students to be in general education, working with the classroom teachers to help those students be successful. So by adding a second classroom here, we will be able to do that, and then we'll also have the caseload more in compliance as well. Some of the things that with emotional support students that the teacher would be doing to support in the general ed environment, they're helping to implement behavior plans and especially design instruction. They're actually modeling how to support a student that has behavioral challenges. They can provide training for those teachers. And then they're also observing the students, because those behavior plans are constantly needing revision. So when they observe a student and then they can see what's happening, they can revise the plan and support the teacher. So that is our justification for this classroom.
This program, the ES program, as well as the S program at the secondary level, are the highest percentage of students who we lose to outside placements and to cyber programs. When the high school went to the model that Dr. Durr referenced back in 16, 17, some of you who are on the board will remember that, the outside placements dropped from 96 to 70 in 1 year. And that was primarily because the high school ES population was better serviced by 2 individuals than 1, because there was someone always available if they were having a bad day or a bad 15 minutes. Currently at the middle school level, we have a similar situation, which is why this second person will be helpful from that standpoint.
Okay. Great. Oh, I still have doodles. I don't know where that came from. So high school autistic support, this is the...
Sherry, I think I did it.
You did.
I didn't do it on purpose, but I think I did it by leaning on my touch screen. So I just want everyone to know that I think we were hacked by me.
Okay.
Okay.
You're just livening things up.
Yeah, unfortunately.
High school high school autistic support. We do not currently have an autistic support teacher or / classroom at the high school. We have 3 students that are moving up to the high school, and 2 students that are currently at the high school working with other case managers. We have 3 students that we're going to make every attempt to bring back from IU and settlement. So we'll have a total of 8 students initially for this classroom / teacher. In the high school, the students are almost fully included, but when they do need that support, we don't have it right now for them to have a classroom to come to or a teacher to come to. Then when we look at our projections in 21-22, we're going to have 11 students moving up to the high school. So this is going to allow us to be better positioned even for that influx that we're going to have into the next year. So we're going to be looking for 1 teacher and 1 teaching assistant for this classroom. When I look at adding this classroom and when I talked about the 3 students that we would be able to bring back from the IU and from settlement, that would be a savings of about $150,000 if we can get those 3 students back. So that's a benefit also to bringing students back and not having to send students out. And we have students that are out because we haven't had this program at the high school. Any questions? Comments? Okay.
Yeah, how many case managers do we have at the elementary level?
Oh, 1 second. $30.
Okay. Do you know what the student to case manager ratio is? If you don't know, you can get back to me later. If you don't have it in front of you.
Well, they're all different because if they have autistic support, it's a maximum of 8. If they have emotional support, maximum of 12. And those numbers fluctuate if they're supplemental versus itinerant. So all the teacher caseloads are all different depending on the students that they have and then their level of inclusion.
And then are those case managers helping to provide modifications and accommodations for the general ed teachers?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the last, is this the last slide? 2 more slides. So this summarizes everything that I just went over. Total of 4 teachers and 6 teaching assistants for these 4 classrooms. And then just a final sort of summary slide, positive outcomes. We now have a continuum K-12, especially for autistic support by adding the class at the high school. It provides additional options for us to bring students back from the IU and outside placements and to prevent students from going out to outside placements. And it just helps us to increase and give a better quality of service by allowing teachers to push in more to general education, give the general education teachers some support and training so that our overall, what we want in the end is for inclusion to increase and students to be supported. And then I guess the total, if we look at all of these classrooms and the students that we are looking to bring back, it would be a minimum of $200,000 in savings if we can get those students back.
Any clarifying questions for Dr. Durr?
I just wanted to point out, because I don't want to leave with the wrong impression, we have phenomenal supervisors at the elementary level, at the middle school level, and at the high school level. Really good special education supervisors. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm suggesting otherwise. But what I do think is that we're not giving them all the tools that they need. I think that their caseloads are so big that they don't have any time to push into classrooms or do any of those things because they're so busy with the caseloads that they have and just doing all of the meetings that they have to do and all of the paperwork that they have to do, that they're not able to provide that additional support. I also think that I don't think that they have that choice in their toolbox. I think that when they sit down at an IEP meeting, their choices are either I put these kids in a classroom, but I don't have all of the supports and the professional development in place for these teachers to be able to handle it right now, or I put them in this autistic support setting instead. and we don't have the middle choice. We don't have any co-teaching options for them to choose, so they can't assign the kids to an option that doesn't exist, a tool in their toolbox that they don't have. And so that's why I would like to see us do more to develop those areas so that we can move in that direction and give them that option as a choice when they're sitting down at those IEP meetings.
Thank you, Mrs. Banis Clemens. I did want to just comment on one thing. We have co-teaching at the high school. We have co-teaching at the middle school. And we have a few examples of co-teaching at elementary school. And that is one of Mrs. Summers' goals, is to look at increasing co-teaching in the elementary school. So that's definitely a goal that we have.
So my understanding was that the options that we have at the elementary school aren't a special education teacher pushing in, but they're mostly aides that are pushing in, aside from specific, I mean, can you explain the specifics of which ones we have at the elementary school?
Of teachers pushing in?
Of co-teaching, like you have a special ed teacher and a regular ed teacher who are co-teaching together. Is that for specific things?
Yeah, I'd have to ask Mrs. Summers exactly where that's happening, because I don't have those details, but I can get that.
Okay, because what I'm seeing is that our special ed teachers don't have time to push in, and so it's just aides that push in, because our special education teachers can't leave their classroom, because then those kids don't have a certified teacher in that classroom, and then they're not able to meet the needs of IEPs. So those special ed teachers can't push in, they then have aides that push in, which is not quite the same.
And part of the reason for that too, Megan, is because they have multiple grade levels on their caseload. So it's very difficult if they've got 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders on their caseload for all those schedules amongst 3 grades to line up perfectly. It's different at the secondary because you've got that period schedule and everybody's operating on the same schedule. And the 5th graders are going to special when the 4th graders are doing math, and not everybody on your caseload needs to be pulled out or pushed in for math. It's very wishy-washy at the elementary level. There's a lot of dynamics that don't make it this pretty clean-cut ability for the teachers to push in, because I've talked to some special ed teachers that said that they would love to co-teach, but they don't know how it would work. And if you have more special education teachers that can take on just 2 grade levels on their caseload instead of 3 or even 4, then that increases their ability to be able to push in at a certain subject area more consistently. Especially with emotional and autistic support, though, these children have the most needs with emotionally. So again, it might be very pretty on paper for them to push in and co-teach, but that doesn't mean that one of their students isn't going to be having a complete meltdown, horrible day, and they need to pull out and go and assist and help that and manage that crisis. And then that pulls them away from being able to bump in and co-teach math that day. So it looks better and on paper, and it actually functions better on paper at the secondary level as compared to the elementary level. And I'm seeing that with the recommendation of an additional teacher and additional teaching assistants at the elementary level, it will increase the probability of that actually happening. That's what I'm seeing.
Mrs. Miller, could you unmute Dr. Thompson at 4198? I believe she has a comment she'd like to make as well.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Thank you. Okay. So I just wanted to thank everyone that's contributing to this conversation for their insight and their comments. This is a very important topic, and I think it demonstrates just by this conversation that we are actually headed in the right direction in our school district, and we are going to be increasing our support. I just wanted to also make sure I thank Dr. Durr for the exceptional work that she's doing here in our district. We're very blessed to have you here, Dr. Durr. And I really wanted to thank you for this comprehensive presentation and all your hard work. And I just wanted to say I believe that we are headed in the right direction. That's all.
Thank you. It's a team effort, though. I mean, everybody helps. So thank you.
Any other clarifying questions or comments? I don't believe any members of the public joined us, but I'll pause for a second if anybody wants to make any public comment at the end. I'll just remind the board members that next Tuesday, we have a committee meeting. We're going to again combine into one committee meeting next week. Again, we have budget presentations. Mr. Daubert will lead us through some of those pieces, as well as some updates on prices from Reynolds for some of the summer work, as more of those bids have come back in. So, Dr. Durr, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think that's everything. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your support.
Okay, then I think, Mr. Kraus, go ahead. Yep.
Not relative to this committee. Did you get the document I sent back to you?
I did. Thank you. It's already been returned to the state. I appreciate it.
Perfect.
All right, everybody. Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.